The Titanic didn't sink because it hit an iceberg. It sank because of decisions made months, even years, before it ever left Belfast. And once you understand those decisions, the iceberg almost becomes irrelevant. For more than a century, the story of Titanic has been told the same way. A great ship, a freak accident, a tragedy no one could have predicted. That version of events is comforting, and comfort is often where the truth gets lost. Because when you strip away the romance, the myths, and the benefit of hindsight, what you're left with is something far more unsettling. The Titanic didn't fail at sea. It failed on the drawing board, in the boardroom, and in the quiet assumptions no one thought to challenge. And from this point on, everything you think you know about the Titanic starts to break down. Let's start with the word everyone knows: unsinkable. The Titanic was never officially declared unsinkable by its designers. That part matters. But White Star Line didn't exactly stop the idea from spreading either. The ship was described as practically unsinkable. That phrase appeared in brochures, newspapers, and newspapers repeated it without question. And slowly, subtly, it hardened into belief. Passengers believed it. Crew absorbed it. The public accepted it. Unsinkable wasn't a technical claim. It was a marketing atmosphere. And here's the part most documentaries skip. Belief changes behavior. When people believe a ship cannot sink, they don't rehearse sinking. They don't imagine it. They don't emotionally prepare for it. That doesn't cause a disaster on its own, but it shapes how people respond when something unthinkable begins to happen. Now let's talk about the design. On paper, the Titanic looked revolutionary. She had 16 watertight compartments, separated by steel bulkheads. The idea was simple. If one section flooded, the others would keep the ship afloat. And that design worked, up to a point. What most people don't realize is that those watertight bulkheads didn't extend all the way to the top of the ship. They stopped several decks below, which meant they were watertight in theory, but not in reality. If water spilled over the top of one compartment, it could flow into the next, and then the next, and then the next. This wasn't a mistake, it was a compromise. Higher bulkheads would have meant redesigns, delays, and reduced luxury space. And luxury was the selling point. The Titanic was designed to survive limited damage. It was never designed to survive a long, continuous rupture along its hull. Not because the engineers were careless, but because nobody wanted to imagine that scenario. And here's something important. The Titanic wasn't badly designed. It was designed for a world that no longer existed. Her safety assumptions were based on earlier ships, earlier routes, earlier risks. But the North Atlantic had changed. Traffic had increased. Ice reports were more frequent. The environment evolved faster than the design philosophy. That was the first domino. Then there were the rivets. Not dramatic, not glamorous, but quietly decisive. The Titanic was held together by millions of rivets. Most were strong. Some were not. Due to production pressure and material shortages, wrought iron rivets were used in certain areas instead of stronger steel ones. In the freezing temperatures of the North Atlantic, wrought iron becomes brittle. Under enough stress, those rivets don't bend. They snap. This didn't cause the collision, but it changed what happened after it. Instead of a clean tear, the hull seams began to open. Tiny gaps formed along the plates. Water poured in across multiple compartments at once. And this is crucial. The Titanic didn't flood because of one massive hole. She flooded because of many small failures happening simultaneously. This wasn't incompetence. It was industrial reality colliding with ambition. Now let's talk about speed. There's a popular myth that the Titanic was trying to break a speed record. She wasn't, but she was trying to prove something else. Reliability, confidence, prestige. In 1912, speed wasn't just about arrival time. It was a statement. A ship that slowed down sent a message. That message was uncertainty, and uncertainty was bad for business. Maintaining speed reassured passengers. It projected confidence. It protected reputation. In that era, slowing down wasn't widely seen as caution. It was seen as weakness. And behind all of this sat commercial pressure. White Star Line wasn't operating in isolation. It was competing with Cunard and other transatlantic giants. Luxury was the differentiator. Reliability was the promise. And prestige was everything. Every major safety decision existed inside that commercial context. More lifeboats would have meant less deck space. Higher bulkheads would have meant delays and redesigns. Reduced speed would have raised uncomfortable questions. None of these choices seemed unreasonable on their own. That's the danger. Disasters rarely come from one reckless decision. They come from many acceptable ones layered over time. This wasn't arrogance in a cartoonish sense. It was normalization of risk. Confidence built slowly. A system that rewarded reassurance over restraint. No single person caused the Titanic to sink. The system did. Now picture the night of April 14th. The sea is calm, unusually calm. There's no moon, no white water breaking against ice. Wireless warnings are coming in. Ice ahead, ice fields, multiple reports. The ship continues on, not recklessly, not dramatically, normally. And that's the most unsettling part. By the time the iceberg appears out of the darkness, the outcome is already leaning in one direction. The Titanic doesn't strike the iceberg and suddenly become doomed. She strikes the iceberg and reveals what was already fragile. The iceberg didn't defeat the Titanic, it exposed it. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Every era believes it has mastered risk. Every generation believes its systems are finally safe enough. That belief never ages well. But none of this explains the most haunting question of all. With warnings pouring in, why didn't the Titanic ever slow down? Because what happened on the bridge that night changes everything. And that's where the story really begins. Everything behind this analysis is linked in the pinned comment below. And if you want more breakdowns that challenge the story we think we know, subscribe and follow.